This podcast is brought to you by Maui Jewelry.
Welcome to the AI Analysis Podcast. If you enjoyed our last episode, you'll love this one too.
Yeah.
This analysis comes to us from our friends at Toon Talk 2.0.
It is definitely a departure from what we usually look at. We're stepping away from the academic papers and the structured interviews.
Far, far away.
We are stepping right into the, I guess you could say, the chaotic, high-energy living room of pure fandom. We're looking at a recording from the show Toon Talk 2.0, and it's less of a structured debate and more like listening to a group of friends just roast each other until somehow the truth comes out.
Exactly. And the vibe here is so important to understand. We're not analyzing a script. We're analyzing a brawl, a verbal brawl. The source material is their Star Wars versus Star Trek episode.
Yeah.
You've got the main voice, who is Virus, and then his friends Jake and Justin. And then later, a fourth guy, Alexander, who they call the Oracle, shows up.
And we have to set the stage visually because a huge part of the early conversation revolves around this. Virus, the host, is just in casual clothes. He actually admits later he's wearing a T-shirt with a cat on it. Right.
Meanwhile, his friends, Justin and Jake, have logged on to this video call wearing full, color-coded, long-sleeve Star Trek uniforms.
Which Virus immediately hates. He hates it so much. You can just feel the secondhand embarrassment radiating off him. But it's also, mixed with aggression.
It creates an immediate visual conflict, doesn't it? The central conflict of the whole thing is, of course, that eternal nerd battle, Star Wars versus Star Trek.
The classics.
But it's layered with this interpersonal conflict where Virus is just relentlessly mocking them for their pajamas, as he calls them.
Okay, let's really get into this because right out of the gate, Virus is completely on the offensive. He starts the show by calling them nerds, but then he immediately rejects the label for himself.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic move.
He says, and this is a quote, "Look, we're not nerds. I'm a Sith Lord, and you're a bald guy in pajamas."
And that is such a fascinating psychological starting point. It touches on that whole, the self-loathing nerd dynamic.
Explain that a little. What do you mean by that? Well, here's Virus, a guy who is hosting a show about sci-fi. He's debating deep lore. He has incredibly strong opinions on things like the Clone Wars cartoons, which is not surface-level stuff.
Not at all.
And yet he draws this incredibly hard line. For him, Star Wars represents something cool or powerful. He calls himself a Sith Lord. But Star Trek, to him, represents passivity and, awkwardness.
He's constantly trying to establish this hierarchy. Like he's the cool jock of the nerd world, and they're the ones in the library.
That's a perfect way to put it. They even get into the terminology. At one point, the documentary Trekkies comes up, and they start discussing the term Trekker.
Right, which is supposed to be the more serious term for a fan.
And Virus just says, that's even worse. The very idea of making that distinction is, to him, more offensive than just wearing the uniform.
It's just so revealing. It highlights that internal struggle within fandoms, the desire to be taken seriously even while you're playing. Virus is trying so hard to distance himself from what he sees as the cringe factor of the Trek fan.
Which is just hilarious when you consider all the technical difficulties they have right at the beginning.
Oh, it's a mess.
The whole discussion is peppered with comments like, Jake fixed the image and OBS did that thing again. So they're sitting there struggling with their own technology while debating the superior fictional technology of the future.
And Virus blames it on them. He says they're using Star Trek technology and that if they just use the Force, everything would be fine.
Which is actually a perfect transition into the first major argument they have. And it's really the core of everything. It's magic versus science.
Or, as Virus frames it, wizards versus bureaucracy.
Exactly. This is the heart of the conflict for him. His main critique of Star Trek is that it is, in his words, boring.
So boring. He says it involves way too much talking, and he specifically really attacks the techno-babble.
He does. He uses the specific phrase, gravimetric interference. He does this whole impression of a Star Trek officer saying, "Sir, we cannot compensate for the gravimetric interference."
I can hear it in my head right now.
And Virus, this is just, quote, bullshit pseudoscience, he says. "I feel like I'm in science class, but I'm getting dumber."
I mean, to be fair, I think we've all felt that watching an episode of Voyager sometimes. Just, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow and let's get on with it.
Precisely. And for Virus, that's not storytelling. It's a lecture. He doesn't want a physics problem to solve. He wants action. He wants visceral results.
But Justin and Jake, they don't take that lying down. They immediately fire back at the Force. And honestly, they make a really, really good point.
They do. They argue that if you can just wave your hand and make things happen, that's not science fiction. That's just magic. Reflexes of a force master, they say. It's just a very fancy way of saying magic wizard.
It is the classic fantasy versus sci-fi distinction, isn't it?
It is. Justin argues that Star Trek, for all its made-up words, at least attempts to ground itself in some kind of scientific theory. Star Wars, on the other hand, relies entirely on a mystical energy field that just fixes things when the plot needs it to.
And Virus's response to this very logical argument.
The Force rules, warp sucks.
Of course.
It's a completely visceral, emotional argument versus their more cerebral one.
And speaking of cerebral, Justin actually tries to defend the pacing of Star Trek. He says his favorite thing about it is the principles. He brings up Deep Space Nine and Captain Benjamin Sisko specifically.
And that's a key moment in the whole discussion, I think. Justin argues that Star Trek puts its characters into situations that are not black and white. He talks about an episode where Sisko has to dance across the line of morality to achieve a greater good. He's making a case for nuance. He's saying Trek asks hard questions.
And Virus just laughs at him for it. He dismisses Star Wars as philosophy for children, but he means it as a compliment.
He does. He says something like, yeah, sorry, we have to keep it simple to move the plot along and have some action. He basically accuses Star Trek of being a poetry reading.
He literally says that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He makes up a hypothetical data scene.
Yes. He goes, Captain, will you be attending my poetry reading later? He's just relentlessly mocking the intellectualism he perceives in Trek. He wants the hero's journey. He explicitly cites the hero's journey as his favorite part of Star Wars. Luke, Chewie, even R2-D2. He wants clear good guys and clear bad guys.
So we've got the core philosophical difference laid out. One side wants a moral play, the other wants a laser sword fight.
That's a good summary.
But then the conversation takes a turn that I genuinely did not see coming. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. They start debating which franchise has the better sex symbols.
This segment was, well, it was quite illuminating about the priorities of the speakers, let's say that.
Virus is completely convinced that Star Trek is for people who, and I'm paraphrasing the source here, don't get any action. He literally asks, how many women has Darth Vader had sex with?
To which he immediately answers his own question with, one, because you just need one true love. Which is a very romanticized view of a child-killing cyborg.
Isn't it? He's framing Vader as this tragic romantic hero, but then he uses that to attack Captain Kirk. He asks how many women Kirk has been with, and the answer is, no one knows. Virus frames this as Kirk leveraging positions.
He makes him sound like a predator, almost.
Exactly. He paints Kirk as this sleazy guy, while Han Solo is the rogue who deep down believes in true love.
It's a very strange kind of revisionist history, but it fits Virus's narrative perfectly.
Yeah.
But Justin and Jake, they actually defend the sex appeal of Trek.
They do. They list Captain Kirk, obviously. They list Spock, and then the one that surprised me, they list Data.
The android.
The android.
Yes, and Patrick Stewart.
Okay, look. Patrick Stewart, I get. Jean-Luc Picard has a certain gravitas. But Data.
Virus has the exact same reaction as you. He mocks them relentlessly for listing an android and an older bald man as sex symbols, especially when he's got Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian on his side.
A very fair point.
But Jake and Justin, they stand their ground. They argue that intelligence has its own appeal and that, fully functional androids are a legitimate choice.
It's just so funny that in a debate about the fate of the galaxy, they spend a solid 5 minutes arguing about who would be better boyfriend material. Han Solo or a positronic android.
It really humanizes the debate, though. It moves it away from, the technical specs of the starships and into character dynamics, which is where most people actually connect with these stories.
That's a good point. And speaking of characters, we absolutely have to talk about the Luke Skywalker versus Captain Kirk beef. This was surprisingly heated. Virus hates Luke Skywalker.
He really does. He calls him a pussy. He calls him a stupid kid that wanted to destroy Dad's business.
Destroy Dad's business. That is such a bizarrely corporate spin on blowing up the Death Star. I laughed out loud when I heard that.
It totally reframes the rebellion in a new light, doesn't it? Just imagine Darth Vader trying to run a startup, a planet-destroying startup, mind you, and his rebellious son comes along and just blows up the head office.
But his point, underneath all that, is that Luke is whiny. He compares him really unfavorably to what he sees as the cool characters Han, Obi-Wan.
But then the debate gets physical. They start discussing a hypothetical fistfight between Captain Kirk and Luke Skywalker, and they're very specific. This is Luke before he becomes a Jedi Master. This is just farm boy Luke versus Starship Captain Kirk.
And the consensus.
Kirk wipes the floor with him. Even the Star Wars guys on the show have to admit it. They specifically mention the drop kick and Kirk Fu.
Kirk Fu, I love that.
They essentially all agree that without the magic of the Force to help him, Luke is just a teenager. Whereas Kirk is a brawler. He's a guy who fights Gorn and Klingons with his bare hands.
I just love that image, Captain Kirk drop-kicking a young Mark Hamill. It really cements that action versus magic debate they were having earlier, doesn't it?
Sure.
Kirk has to rely on his fists and his wits. Luke relies on an ancient religion.
It's a perfect encapsulation of their entire argument.
But if we're going to talk about action, we have to talk about the bad guys. Who is the ultimate villain, according to the Toon Talk crew?
For Star Trek, it's completely unanimous. Khan. But they are very, very specific about this. It has to be the Ricardo Montalban version from the 1982 movie The Wrath of Khan.
Not the Benedict Cumberbatch version from the new movies?
No, they are very critical of the Cumberbatch version from Into Darkness.
Is it just nostalgia for Montalban? Or is there more to it?
There's actually more to it. Virus, of all people, makes a really serious point. He mentions that Ricardo Montalban was a rare Latino icon in a major sci-fi villain role. He felt that replacing him with a British actor Cumberbatch was a huge missed opportunity and kind of erased that important representation.
Wow, that's a moment of really serious cultural critique in the middle of all the jokes.
It is. They also give honorable mentions to the Borg and the Gorn, but Khan is the undisputed king of Trek villains for them.
And what about for Star Wars?
That's a bit more divided. Virus obviously loves Vader. He calls him the scariest villain, especially in Empire Strikes Back. He also mentions Darth Maul, just for being a total badass who managed to survive being cut in half. But Justin throws a complete curveball. He picks General Grievous.
The robot with the cough. From Revenge of the Sith.
No. And that's the crucial distinction he makes. He specifies that his pick is the General Grievous from the Genndy Tartakovsky animated series, the 2003 Clone Wars.
Oh, the 2D animated one. Right.
Exactly. And in that version, Grievous is absolutely terrifying. He's a silent Jedi hunter. He uses his feet to wield extra lightsabers. He crushes Jedi throats. He is not the mustache-twirling, coughing villain from the movie.
That just shows that these guys really know their lore.
Yeah.
You know, they aren't just casuals who've only seen the blockbusters. They are consuming all the side content.
Which brings us to a recurring segment, the dad joke interludes. Throughout all this high-level analysis of villains and morality, Virus just keeps trying to derail everything with terrible jokes.
It feels like he has a website open with like 2,000 bad sci-fi jokes.
Yeah.
And he's just using them to either diffuse tension or maybe create more tension.
What is Darth Vader's favorite dinner? Obi-Wan cannoli.
Wookiee steak is chewy. That one is barely even a joke. It's just an observation.
And then there was one that was a bit darker, and it actually got a reaction from me. He makes a joke about Anakin and Padme. He says, "She's trapping you, bro."
That was less of a joke and more like Virus just projecting his own relationship anxieties onto a fictional character from space. He basically starts yelling at fictional Anakin through the screen like, "Run! She's going to get pregnant without discussing it first."
It is pure chaotic energy, but it serves a function, I think. It breaks up the arguments when they get too heated. It reminds you that despite all the insults, and there are plenty of insults, this is fundamentally a group of friends having fun. It stops the whole debate from becoming genuinely toxic.
Absolutely. And you definitely need that levity because when they move on to the next section, the new stuff, things get a little heated in a very different way. They stop fighting each other and they start fighting the studios.
This is what we could call the united front of disappointment.
That's it, exactly. And there's this massive conspiracy theory that Virus launches into. He insists with total and complete confidence that Disney owns shares of Paramount and is actively killing Star Trek from the inside.
This is such a textbook example of motivated reasoning in fandom, isn't it? Virus sees Star Trek struggling, in his opinion, and he sees Disney as this all-powerful empire. So in his mind, he connects the dots. He even claims that the New York Times reported on it.
And Jake, who is kind of the voice of reason here, is having none of it. He just keeps trying to tell him, you don't own the IP just because you own some stock. He explains the difference between stock ownership and actual operational control. But Virus will not hear it. He wants to believe in the Disney monopoly.
It reflects a very genuine anxiety that a lot of people have about media consolidation. They joke about a Disney Star Wars Star Trek crossover, imagining Kirk fighting Vader. But underneath all the jokes, you can tell there's a real fear of these very distinct universes just blending together into some kind of generic content sludge.
And they apply that same criticism to the new movies and shows, too. They get into a discussion about what they call the generational cycle. Justin admits that he loves Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Which Virus immediately points out is a huge generational shift. He notes that for years, hating the prequels was the cool default thing to do for Star Wars fans.
Right. It was the law.
It basically was. But now the kids who grew up on those movies, like Justin, are the adults, so suddenly the prequels are being reevaluated and loved, and all the hate has been redirected to the new sequels.
They really, really go in on Attack of the Clones, though. They all seem to agree it's the worst movie because of the dialogue, specifically the infamous "I don't like sand" line.
Right, of course.
But interestingly, they all seem to agree that Rogue One and the show Andor are the adult versions of Star Wars. They praise them.
Although Virus does have a critique of Andor, he feels it requires homework. He says, who is Cassian Andor and why should I care? He prefers the immediate gratification of the main saga, whereas Justin appreciates the nuance and the slow burn.
And once again, it mirrors the exact same Star Wars versus Star Trek dynamic, right? Action versus nuance. But this time it's happening within the Star Wars fandom itself.
That's a fantastic point. The old battle lines are being redrawn inside the franchise.
So what about Star Trek's new identity? What's their take on that?
They pretty much agree that the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies are just Star Wars movies with Trek skin, all lens flares, fast pacing, and action. But the most damning praise, or maybe the most revealing comment, goes to the Orville.
Seth MacFarlane's show.
Yes. They unanimously agree that the Orville, even though it's technically a comedy or a parody, feels more like authentic Star Trek than the actual official new Star Trek shows do.
That's a huge statement.
It is. They say the Orville captures the spirit of the original, the lighting, the sense of optimism, even the kind of cheesy humor. Virus talks about how much he loves a scene where the crew just sits around and discusses the song My Heart Will Go On.
It is amazing that the best Star Trek show on TV, according to these diehard fans, isn't even Star Trek. That says so much about the current state of the franchise in their eyes.
It really suggests that fans value the feeling and the spirit of a thing more than they value the official branding on the box.
Before we get into the betrayals and the big draft pick, we do need to take a quick moment. We should acknowledge the sponsor that made this whole chaotic debate possible in the first place.
You will not believe how this ring changes color right on your hand. Seriously, by day it's a dreamy green, and by night, suddenly deep red. Alexandrite is rarer than diamonds, but with Molly Jewelry's lapstones, I actually got this magical look without dropping a fortune. The stone totally stands out, and you can pick your fave shape and metal. It's a lucky little transformation piece, so special for gifts or just yourself. Which cut would you choose? Drop a comment and let's obsess together.
Now let's get back to the analysis, because we have a traitor in our midst.
Ah, yes. The Judas moment.
It's Justin. He is sitting there in a full Star Trek uniform, a commander's uniform. Mm-hmm. He hosts a podcast called The Final Frontier. And yet, throughout this entire episode, he keeps siding with Star Wars.
It drives Virus absolutely crazy. At one point, Virus compares him to Peter denying Jesus. He says something like, you just denied him once? You're already denying your guy right now.
So intense.
But it highlights the fluidity of modern fandom, I think. Justin represents the fan who can enjoy the aesthetic and the community of one thing, but maybe his heart actually belongs to the storytelling of another. He says he loves the goofy and silly nature of Trek, but when it comes down to it, his arguments always seem to defend the hero's journey of Star Wars.
And then, when things are at their most tense, we have the arrival of the Oracle, Alexander.
He arrives late, just like Han Solo swooping in at the last minute to save the day.
Except he doesn't save the day for Virus. He was brought in specifically to be backup for Team Star Wars. Virus introduces him like he's this secret weapon he's been holding back.
Yeah.
But then, the twist.
The twist is so significant. The Oracle, after some prodding, eventually admits that Star Trek might actually be his favorite sci-fi franchise of all time.
Virus must have been absolutely heartbroken. His reinforcements turned on him.
He was. The Oracle makes a really good case for it. He argues that Star Trek's cultural impact, the phrase live long and prosper, is just undeniable. He appreciates its optimism. So Virus, the big Star Wars defender, suddenly finds himself completely isolated, surrounded by a bunch of closeted Trek fans.
But they do find a way to come together at the end. They play a game, the Dream Team Draft.
This was my favorite part of the entire analysis. They each have to pick 4 friends from either universe to go on an adventure with. No betrayals, no fighting, just a good crew.
Let's break down these teams because they tell you so much about the psychology of each of these speakers.
They really do. Jake goes first. He picks Darth Vader, Geordi LaForge, Dr. Bashir, and Garak.
That is an incredibly practical team. You have the muscle and the intimidation factor with Vader, you have the master engineer with Geordi, the doctor with Bashir, and the spy with Garak. Jake is planning to survive.
Exactly. He's building a functional unit. He's not looking for fun. He is looking for efficiency and results. He's thinking completely logistically.
Right. Then you have Justin. He picks Spock, Bones, Obi-Wan from the episode 3rd era, and Anakin before he becomes Vader.
Vader's a hangout crew.
That's exactly it. He specifically says he picks Bones for drinking. He wants to go have a beer with the ship's doctor, and he picks Anakin and Obi-Wan because he loves their banter. He's not planning an adventure. He's planning a road trip with his buddies. He wants to be part of the bromance.
All about the good vibes for him.
Yeah.
And then there's Virus.
Oh, boy. Virus's team.
Virus picks Count Dooku, a mature Spock, Darth Vader, and he specifies the child-killing era version and Rachel Nichols.
The Orion slave girl from the 2009 J.J. Abrams movie.
Yes.
So he picks 3 of the most powerful and ruthless beings in the galaxy and a slave girl.
He's quite transparent about why. He says, I can sit down and rule the universe. He's not looking for an adventure with friends. He is looking for total domination. It aligns perfectly with his whole Sith Lord persona that he established at the very beginning.
He doesn't want friends. He wants minions.
He wants to be the bad guy. It's so consistent. It's funny how a simple party game can expose everyone's core motivations. Jake wants to fix things, Justin wants to hang out, and Virus wants to conquer.
And what about the Oracle? What was his team?
He chose Kirk, Spock, Data, and R2-D2.
The icons. He just went for the Mount Rushmore of classic sci-fi.
Which fits his nickname, right? The Oracle. He values the legends, the history, the foundational figures.
So after all the drafts and all the debates and the insults, where do they finally leave us? What's the final verdict from Toon Talk?
They end with recommendations. They give homework for the listeners.
Okay, what's on the list?
For Star Wars, they recommend The Mandalorian, but season 1 only. They recommend Empire Strikes Back, which they cite as having the best plot twist in cinema history, and they recommend Rogue One.
And for Star Trek.
For Trek, they recommend Deep Space Nine as the best overall series, The Voyage Home, which is the one with the whales and the time travel, and surprisingly, the original series.
It's actually kind of touching, isn't it? Virus, the guy who spent the whole hour mocking guys in pajamas, is the one who recommends the original series.
It is. He says you have to watch it for the history of it and for its ability to make you dream.
And that really is the ultimate conclusion of the source material we analyzed. They fight tooth and nail about the details, the Force versus warp drive, Kirk versus Luke. But in the end, they agree that both of these franchises have incredible merit. They basically conclude that Star Wars is for the childhood wonder, the hero's journey for the heart.
While Star Trek is the moral play for the adult mind, it's designed to make you think.
And Virus even admits that Rogue One is his favorite of the new stuff, because it made him feel the nostalgia of the original era. It proves that for all his bluster about being a cool Sith Lord, he's just chasing that feeling of being a kid in his backyard with a toy lightsaber.
Precisely. That nerd label that he so forcefully rejects at the beginning is actually the one thing that binds all of them together. They are all chasing that same sense of wonder. And whether that comes from a green girl in space or a farm boy looking at twin suns on the horizon, the fundamental feeling is the same.
That's a beautiful way to put it. They might be roasting each other, but it all comes from a place of deep shared love for these worlds.
Indeed. It's a great reminder that fandom, at its very core, is about connection. Even if that connection is sometimes expressed through loud arguments about proton torpedoes and insults about pussies.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to us right now? I think it means that maybe you don't actually have to choose. You can like the space wizards and the space bureaucrats. You can enjoy the magic and the science.
And perhaps listening to their debate forces us all to ask ourselves a question. What do we actually value in our stories? Do we want the pure escapism of the Force, or do we want the ethical rigor of the Prime Directive? Or maybe, do we just want a cool robot that coughs a lot?
A question for the ages.
Indeed.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today, from the fashion choices of the hosts all the way to the corporate conspiracies of Disney. This was a wild ride through the Toon Talk universe.
It really was a fascinating case study in fan dynamics.
Do you agree with Toon Talk when it comes to Star Trek? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.
Call me Mr. Feelgood, we can dance and we can fly together. Call me Mr. Feelgood, spread your wings and we can fly together. Call me Mr. Feelgood, we can dance and